Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our March 9th, 2023 meeting of the Houston chapter, the Electric Vehicle Association. Glad to have folks here in person and online. And it's very exciting that we've got connections with our partners up in Canada today. And we have a speaker from Native Renewables. And at the end, we will have one of our own here, Andrew, talk about his project. So lots of good things to cover here this evening. And first, I want to make everyone aware of some of the things that we have coming up very soon. So as a lot of folks are familiar, in April, we have Drive Electric Earth Day, which falls on Earth Day, which is on a Saturday this year. April 22nd is a Saturday. And this year we're going to be showing our cars and telling fellow Houstonians about them at two different locations. So one is our Discovery Green location, which we've done a number of times. And then the other is our IKEA location that we had done back a little ways. So the timing on the two is a little bit different. It's just in the morning at IKEA, and we'll have it up at the front near the store, and that'll be from 9 to 12. And folks are pretty much free to come and go as they want to during that time. So we encourage you to go to the national site and sign up. Our Discovery Green location will be from 10 to 5, and there's a bit more of a limitation there because they usually have us park on a particular sidewalk. They don't want us moving the cars during the time of the event. So we get there early, we park our cars, and then we're pretty much locked in the whole time. But I really appreciate anybody who's excited about those as I am to come out to either one of those. I've talked to some folks individually, and I think those will both be really fun events coming up. And we will not have a regular second Thursday meeting in April because we are doing these events. An additional event that we're working on is a Lucid event for April 15th, which is the Saturday before the 22nd. And that would be at the Lucid location up on I-45 North. And so watch your emails, and we will see about getting some more information out to everybody about what's happening with Lucid. So more exciting things. It's just really wonderful seeing all the different cars, talking with Jason about VW ID4 and the Rivians and all these different vehicles that are out there now. Is a lot of fun. So does anybody else have any announcements, comments? Yeah. Bill?
I think I'll bring a couple of electric bicycles to one or both of the events.
Oh yeah, bringing electric bikes to one or both of those events would be wonderful. Okay, thanks, Bill. Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
So you wanted to go through the different slides? We have some
Yeah,
things that the big organization has asked us to make people know about. And I think this sounds like it's a lot of fun. It's out in Arizona, and they're taking a section of the old Route 66 and turning it into Electric Avenue. And so that is coming up at the beginning of May. So you can research that if you're available to go out there. I'm thinking that I might be out there. I'm not sure yet, but that sounds like it really would be a fun thing to take part in.
They had 4 electric cars or something like that last year, and they want to overwhelm them this year.
Yeah,
So,
really up the participation rate. Yeah. Well, it's all part of coming out of the pandemic, of course, getting word out, getting people together again.
this is something that they're also promoting, which is the recurrent battery health. So this is a free battery report for your car. What you're giving up is your data, of course. And I'll show you an example of what that looks like. And here's my Model Y, and it shows maybe some interesting information here. I found this interesting because they like you to charge between 30 and 80%, and it shows you how many times I hit that, and a little information about how the battery is holding up.
That's good info.
Yeah, so for everybody that signs up, National gets a $10 or something like that. So they're absolutely promoting this.
Very good. Okay, did you have one more slide?
Yeah, we got something for Bill.
Yeah, everyone is not aware of this, it's a skate car, it's a legal three-wheeler. I think it comes in AC or DC drive, I'm not entirely sure. The website is not. Okay. The website kind of
It's on.
challenge to navigate. But, you know, I've participated in 3 conversions and DC generally, and had some electric trucks. And from my perspective, the only thing I don't know anything about is, not that I know anything else, but is the CAN bus on these systems. And I'm sure all that's spelled out. You see the guy on the right has a huge manual. I think I invited someone from St. John's High School tonight, who, you know, some of the high schools like to teach. Yeah. And, you know, and what is the ASE, the American, the automotive, the mechanics group that trains mechanics to work on cars? They could benefit hugely by training on this platform. Anyway, I don't really, you know, I told Roland, the guy that runs this place, he said, when he heard the price, I think that the price, correct me if I'm wrong, Colin, 20 grand for.
I think it's 25 to 45, depending on what you want.
Yeah, and Roland said, well, just go buy an EV that's with a bad battery for 2 grand. Of course, taking it apart and exposing all the CAN bus and all the things would be a challenge, but.
Right. Well, yeah, part of what you're buying is a curriculum. You're buying a curriculum, and you can go to their classroom and get trained in it. So it is worth more than that. But yeah, I mean, one of the people here suggested that there may be some money from Chase available for something like this. So we might be able to work with them on this. But I like the idea of doing something more than and several chapters are doing EVs in community colleges, and we need to get them ready for what's next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The sharing of information is always really good for that. So, all right. So thanks for having those slides ready, Colin. That was really good. And if no one else has any other announcements, move right on to Suzanne. So you about ready? See, it says Robin's in the waiting room there too, but okay. All right. So I know we've got a great video from Suzanne as well, but first let me introduce Suzanne. So Dr. Suzanne Singer is a co-founder and the executive director of Native Renewables. Her mechanical engineering and energy analysis background provides the technical foundation to develop programs that promote tribal energy independence, offer affordable off-grid solar energy solutions, and provide training and education programs that empower families. Prior to founding NRI, Singer was a staff engineer and postdoc at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory and an intern with Sandia National Laboratory's Tribal Energy Program. Singer is the winner of the 2019 U.S. Clean Energy Education and Empowerment Entrepreneurship Award and a 2021 Echoing Green Fellow. She earned a PhD in MS in Mechanical Engineering from the University of California, Berkeley, and a BS in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Arizona. So it's fantastic that you've got time for us here today. This is really exciting. Everyone here, of course, is very much interested in where the electricity that fuels their electric vehicles come from. And it's just fantastic to get more and more people in the country involved. So I'll turn it over to you, Suzanne.
Awesome. Well, thank you for inviting me to the meeting. It's nice to meet you all. It's nice to be in a different space presenting. So I am Suzanne Singer Yanishia Khatsani initially, like I didn't Bashichin, be between Dashiche, Doashi, Dashanella. I am member of the Navajo Nation, the Diné Nation, and so introduce you with my clans. I am of the Tingle clan, born for the Mexican clan, and my maternal, paternal grandparents are of the Deerwater and the Salt clan. And I'm currently based or calling from Flagstaff, Arizona, and that's where our nonprofit is based. So Native Renewables, I'll just talk a little bit about it before introducing the video, but we're a nonprofit organization. Originally started in 2016 in the Bay Area, and the other co-founders, another Navajo woman, and we're super frustrated that so many of our community members, that time I think it was around 16,000 estimated family members or community members didn't have access to electricity, grid tied electricity. So very common. You'll see a little bit of this in the video, but very common to flashlights, kerosene lanterns, propane lanterns, sometimes generators, gasoline generators. So really non-reliable sources of electricity. And it's definitely a challenging environment to work in. Sometimes the infrastructure is not always there. So you'll see in the video, like we're driving on dirt roads. We've driven more than 5 hours one way before to get to community members we support. We have to have really great plans beforehand because we realize we may not have internet or cell phone service. So there's lots of fun things we have to think about in terms of how we implement and install projects. And so largely our big focus is on installing off-grid solar power with battery storage for individual family homes. And we can get in more details about specifics of why we design where they are after the video. But other things that we do, we're very committed to building our own workforce. A lot of the history of solar within our tribal nations is importing expertise, contracting people from other states to come in and do the work. And once they leave, it's really hard to find people to do the maintenance piece. And so we are now a team of 15 folks on our workforce, is very much to build up our own local knowledge so that we have the capacity and local knowledge to actually do operations and maintenance or provide technical assistance to the community members that may need them. Other things that are really important in the off-grid world is education on energy consumption, energy efficiency. Since you're not connected to the grid, you don't just pay for what you use, you're very limited. So helping the families understand that, and there is a limit to how much they can use before they drain their batteries, is really critical to the sustainability of our program as a whole. And the last piece of our program that we have is called triage. So there is systems out there that don't work anymore that we didn't install. So we do our best to get those running again or repower them, whether we change out the batteries, sometimes we switch out modules. Sometimes it's like a whole new redesign, like every project's different. So it's a great learning experience. Just it's a lot of, time commitment that we have as well. So this video was filmed about a year and a half ago. It doesn't feel like that long ago. And this is actually one of the first installs, I think the first install we did in the Hopi Nation. And the Hopi Nation is encompassed within the larger Navajo Nation. So it's about 27,000 square miles or more that we work across. So, but I love our team. It's a lot of fun. So I hope you enjoy. So let me try to set this up, and also let me know if you can't hear the sound as well.
Okay. Yes, we hear the sound.
Why is this happening? Why aren't families getting power? Why is there no solid program or infrastructure that's actually helping Navajo families When I was younger, I would spend a lot of time at my grandparents' homes on the Navajo Reservation. It's funny because I thought everyone knew what it was like to live off grid or not have electricity. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized it's not a common thing and most people are shocked, I think, that so many families don't have power.
On Navajo Nation, there's approximately 10,000 households that don't have electricity in their homes. That's a huge challenge. If they're lucky, families have electrical lines coming to their homes. But if they're in a remote area where they can't get access to the electrical grid, they're going to have to figure out another way to get power to their homes.
When we first moved out here, we're just getting used to everything off grid. We're trying to figure out what we use for lighting. And one of the first things we used was some kerosene lanterns. And then we upgraded to propane. And along with that, we had candles. We've been using a generator for power and really small solar system that we've been using for lights and also for charging our phones. And that's all that we have.
Okay, so what do we have packed for tomorrow?
Three amp breakers.
Native Renewables is a native-led nonprofit organization that is focusing on solving energy access to get power to roughly 15,000 families who don't have access to grid-tied electricity. And we do that by providing off-grid solar installation, education, and workforce training.
Navajo Nation has had a long history of coal mining and coal jobs. So it's kind of ironic to know that we are one of the largest tribes to provide coal for electricity in this part of the United States. And yet there's still homes on Navajo without electricity.
Ultimately, it's like we're just frustrated for our people, and someone needs to be here to help them.
We're about 100 miles one way from the hardware store or a solar store. So it's good to have a list to be able to pack and kit. I've been doing electrical work for approximately 39 years. I'm pretty much the electrician out in the field. So I'll garner my tool belt to make sure that the home is wired safely. So I believe we're driving in this direction. Yeah, like south to 89. According to this, it's probably like hour and a half. Working out in the remote areas, we're pretty much at the beck and call of the weather because there's different soil conditions out in Indian country. You can get stuck there.
We have the battery cable.
We are trying to be an organization that trains people and invests in them. Our staff is all Navajo and Hopi. Most of our team lives on the res and they're from the community we work in.
I commute to the office and that takes me about 2.5 hours one way. It's worth it because we're helping out the Native American families, Navajo families, Hopi families get power.
At the end of the day, when we install everything and turn on that light, you could see that smile, You can feel it in their hearts, that it's a good feeling.
All right,
Ready
cool.
to go?
All right, yeah, hit the road. The sun is a critical part of our daily living. Traditionally, we pray in the direction of the sun. Farmers know what the patterns are of the sun, and they use that to literally grow life and food for our communities. So giving them the knowledge of solar energy and allowing them to feel that energy independence of being able to manage their own system and own their own power is super exciting.
Hey, how's it going? It's good to see you guys again. Yeah. You guys excited to get your house wired with solar? We'll be here for a couple of hours and then hopefully get your house going and then we'll be out of your hair.
They've been out here for about 3 or 4 visits and every time they give us a little more education on the power system
I'm really happy to see natives giving back to natives. They're all so knowledgeable and real skilled, and we're just so grateful that they chose us to give this project to.
Got it? Yeah.
Like if we look at the compass, it's facing true south. We get a chance, we'll check the angles so that we can get the most sunlight.
We have 6 children and 8 grandchildren. So family is everything. Gathering is everything. And the kitchen is often a place where people gather. And that's how I'd like our kitchen, especially like during the holidays. We don't have holidays here. So to have more light in our house, that's really important to us, is to have people feel welcome.
So by this evening, you'll be able to use the switches for the first time in your house? Turn on your lights?
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
She was saying that you'll come back every year and check it. And
Yes.
that's like, wow, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's going to be a great service to us.
I think it is a joy to see the tribes actually thrive on solar and develop clean energy based on natural resources. When they are able to turn on the light in their home, it's power from the sun when they flip that switch.
Wow, look at that.
Look at that. That's bright.
It's right.
It's
Very bright.
really bright.
To think about how long we've depended on the sun to be able to live. I think it just makes sense for Native cultures to lead the effort with clean energy. It's just so exciting to see that they've used technology to tap their own natural resources for their own energy future.
It's just kind of emotional in a way. I'm so grateful.
Very nice, very nice.
Awesome. So yeah.
With the Venture X card from Capital
Whoa,
One, you earn
sorry.
2 times miles.
That's okay. So that's really inspiring, as you say, people helping people, and it's in your part of the world. And you know, we communicate with folks just all over the place nowadays. The one thing that came to mind is when the mention of internet and cell service not being available in some of those remote places. It just makes me think of how, so here in Houston, we often call this Space City because of the connection with NASA. And of course, NASA has a connection with SpaceX, and SpaceX is putting up the Starlink satellites specifically so that people in remote areas can get the internet that people in urban areas already get. And that's just so important so that young people can get good educations and so on and so forth. And so that was the first thing that came to mind when thinking about how there's a lot of people in this country that live remotely. And of course, solar is the way to get electricity to them. And so glad that you established that organization to do that, to help so many people. So,
Yeah, thank you.
so I think we have questions here. Bill?
Thank you very much. Dr. Singer, is that it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So these are off-grid systems, and I assume they all incorporate batteries. And I saw a picture of a battery, and I wondered, number one, was it lead acid or was it lithium? And if it's lithium, either chemistry, I'm very curious about the longevity of these batteries. Thank you.
Yeah, so in that video, and typically we're using lead acid, the sealed lead acid batteries, or the AGM absorbed glass mat style. There's a long history of flooded lead acid batteries being used for a lot of these community members. Some of the challenges around that are like the need to add water and adding it at a very specific time. So just adding it whenever is not ideal in a perfect world. So having that education and knowledge even around how to maintain any flooded batteries is really important. Part of the reason we are using the sealed lead acid ones is it's a little bit more maintenance free for those, like for elders who maybe don't have the ability to go in and do that kind of maintenance. We have tried out some lithium batteries in other systems. And depending on the technology, there's, you know, other challenges that come up. And so some of the things we have to be mindful of is the temperature ranges, operating temperature ranges of the different battery types. And then in terms of the longevity, we've only been using, at least us personally, the lithium for maybe a year for certain systems. And so still testing them out and seeing what we think of them. The flooded batteries, so you saw Deb in that video, was of course an expert, and she shared that her flooded batteries lasted more than 10 years for her personal system. So I think it's a huge range depending on whether you drain them or not. You could definitely shorten the life to like 2 years, 1 year. So that's definitely what we want to avoid. The other major factor in using lead acid batteries at this point is the recyclability is really easy. I think for the lithium side, I know there's still, I think it's getting better, but about a year ago, manufacturers were like, well, by the time you'll need to recycle them, we'll have a solution. And so that's not really a great answer for how we move forward in that process. So we're definitely, our goal is to try to keep on top of how that's being managed in the coming years.
So yeah, that's really good that you mentioned that about the recycling, and it's kind of a chicken and egg thing. And we see that with the batteries for cars as well. As you say, there's not possibilities, but the cars that are the EVs that are on the road now are generally new. I mean, there's very few old ones that are, we're just starting to get to the point where some of those early ones are being retired. And we have heard about recycling coming on board in the same way that now I've read that there are methods to recycle the wind turbine blades. So I don't know about in your particular area, but when I've traveled across the Southwest, I always take photos when I see some of the wind turbines, because I know that's providing power to people that live in those areas. And I thought that was great when I heard about now companies able to recycle actually down to the resin level of the wind turbine blades. And so that's good, but that's a good question, Bill, on the types of batteries. So you have another question, Bill?
Yeah, another question. The system sizes, I'm very curious how small they are, the size of the array itself. These are not your, and also are part of the loads air conditioning loads? Probably not, but I defer to you on that. Thank you.
Yeah, so the PV array size is roughly 2.3, 2.4 kilowatts in size. The intent of the system was to provide, I'll say, basic or essential needs. So enough for energy efficient refrigerator, lights, and electronic devices. We are planning sometime this year to start to go through the exercise of figuring out what does it look like if we add on a mini split. How does that change our load? I know heating and air conditioning is a really big challenge in our world. So we've had a lot of conversations lately with people who are interested in building better homes. If you've been here, some of the housing stock is like really terrible, and it starts personally to get into that discussion of if it's going to be leaking really badly, heat and cold, is it worth powering those things? So it leads to a lot of other big issues that exist in trying to this whole ecosystem of great homes with good insulation, energy efficiency, and electricity.
Yeah, I can imagine. And here in Houston, of course, air conditioning is the first thing anybody ever talks about when they talk about energy usage because of our high humidity, and you just have to wring that water out of the air here. But No, I absolutely agree. You go with the most essential loads first and move out from there. But as the part costs for these systems come down, then of course in the future you can look at things. But yeah, absolutely, how leaky a particular building or home is the first thing to look at. So I see here in the chat from Robert, we have the question: how much funding does NR get from federal, state, local, tribal governments?
Hi, Robert. So not much from the federal side. We have a small EPA grant that we have, although I think in the next few years, we're going to be applying for a lot more opportunities. That's, man, there's a lot of stuff coming down. We're just trying to stay on top of it. It's a lot of information for such a small team to sift through. On the state level, right now we have 0, but we have proposals into the state of New Mexico that's looking at some energy transition efforts that came out of the closing of a coal generating station in the northwestern part of New Mexico. So we're hopeful that something comes out of that, but we shall see. On the local side, from I guess outside the reservation, we don't really get a lot of funding, and from the tribal government, we have a few small contracts that we've had, so like probably groups of 10, a few of a groups of 10. But majority of the funding that we get is from philanthropy and donations.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, and I know Robert has been out there in New Mexico before, and I've spent time in Arizona, so this is great. Other questions, either online or in the room? Yep.
Why is not the roof? I noticed at least in that one occasion, you didn't use the roof.
Yeah, the major reason is a lot of the roofs are older, and it's just a whole nother level of looking at the structural integrity of something. So it adds on work for us, cost for us. And so we, for the most part, if there's land accessibility, it's easier just to install on the ground.
Sure, makes sense. Yeah, you've got the land area available. So first Bill and then Jason. Yeah.
So within Houston, the city of Houston, you have to get a permit from the building code department, and which is somewhat of a headache. And I assume that is not the case. It's just educating the owners of the system to, first off, doing a good job, good, safe job electrically, but also educating the homeowners to keep it going. Thank you.
Yeah, education, like you said, is really important. There's not a lot of codes related to installing solar or related to the building. But as a team, we're very much committed to safety. So everybody's got OSHA training. We're keeping track of the electrical codes that new ones that come out, particularly related to solar. So we hope that culture of safety and, being mindful of the codes being in place is something that continues, not with just our organization, but others as well that work in our communities.
Okay, good. Jason?
So I had a couple questions. First one I had, thought I had as we were going through stuff was, what kind of insight do the end users have to the state of the system? Is there like a voltage meter or state of charge so they can have a visual on how much power they have left, or is it more just training and understanding the capabilities of the system?
Yeah, so I would say largely the training capabilities. We are actually in the next year, we have projects that are going to be testing out different types of, I'll say, battery monitors. And so if they get close into the system, they can actually look at some of the voltage parameters, current parameters. Some of them, I would say, it's extra work to explain what exactly voltage and current is, and particularly to some of the community members that maybe don't speak English. So there's a lot of we have to be thoughtful about how we try to explain concepts that maybe don't have a corollary in another language. But I think we've had some really cool battery monitors. I think partly the distance that we are at sometimes makes it challenging to use some of those. I think a lot of times the cables that connect into it are shorter than our runs. So that's something we're also thinking about. And I think another long-term goal is to try out demo some, let's say satellite, we get Starlink in there. Is there ways for us to think about remote monitoring? So that's another option. For some of the lithium batteries, like we've used Simplify before, and they can work with things like Victron components. So we have had some families can use an app to be able to look at what their battery state of charge is. And it's kind of interesting. There's also a digital literacy component we have to think about, is like sometimes people don't have smartphones, so that's not an option for some people. Some people, we have to educate them how to use Bluetooth because they've never used Bluetooth before. So we've actually learned a lot about all these extra educational things that we have to bring into the mix when we start bringing in like high tech apps and technology.
Oh, that's really interesting. The other question I had was, since you're electrifying off-grid applications, I'm sure most of their appliances are typically gas or propane, that kind of thing. How much do you size the system for assuming that once they have electricity, they're going to go out and buy a microwave or a little more electric appliances to fill out the place now that they have it?
Yeah, so one of the first visits when we make with them, we put together kind of a list of all of with their wish list essentially of what they want to use, and they make their best guess on how frequently they're going to use it. And then our team will basically do a calculation on what their total energy load looks like. And if it's way overboard, we'll start making recommendations for like, you probably shouldn't use that. You're going to drain your battery. And so that's partly the method that we use. And there is, I don't know what percentage. So some of the folks do have like propane stoves. Very few of them have propane refrigerators, but that does exist from some of I don't remember when they got them, decades ago. And so I think some of what makes it hard sometimes is like microwaves or anything with a heating element, we tell them is like, that'll drain it faster than anything else that you plug in. So to be very careful, or even coffee, heaters, like if you're going to use it, unplug it, put it in a thermos, don't let it continually heat. So those are some of the harder ones though, because people do get cold and like, can I please plug it in? And we're like, oh, just for a little bit, try to let it charge some more. But it is it's hard to get to that point where you're sizing it for whatever they need. Or it's a trade-off. Is the more we size it, larger we size it for what they need, the less families we can support. So that is part of the big dilemmas that we have.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The last question I had on the note of sizing was, how many cloudy days do you plan for on the battery sizing? Is it, because I assume, having been in that area of the road before, it is pretty sunny, but there are cloudy days. So, you don't want to have them go without electricity just because you had 2 cloudy days in a row.
Did you ask? I think if I heard you correctly, you're asking kind of like the days of autonomy for.
Yeah. So without the solar, if you have a cloudy day, how many cloudy days do you plan for in the system sizing?
Yeah, we size it for 3 days.
So Bill, you have a question?
Yes, can you share for us the dollar per watt installed? Thank you.
Oh boy. So let's see. That system right now is roughly 20K per unit. So what is that? It's close roughly $6 to $9, I think, is what I've seen historically. And a big part of that is the battery costs.
Right, because you're using with batteries. Yeah, a lot of systems that go in Houston, they're without batteries. So those would be a lower dollar cost per watt. But once you add the batteries in, of course, it really ups it, which obviously in remote locations, that's a requirement. Yeah. Aha, and a different type of inverter that can handle the battery makes it a more pricey inverter. Okay, yeah. So that's, again, a grid interconnect system can be cheaper in dollars per watt. Yeah. Okay, good to know. Thanks, John. All right. Any other questions from folks? We really appreciate it, Suzanne. I mean, this has been really enlightening, and it's just fun to talk with different people and get their perspectives. So looks like from Robert, how many homes and systems have you installed to date? When do you anticipate all homes will be?
So we've done about 40 new ones and 12 repowered ones. So systems that we didn't do, but we got them going again. Oh, when do we when do we want them all to be serviced? I think it would, if we're doing this at the rate we will, who knows, we're having scaling up discussions all the time, and how can we get there faster? I would love it if they're all good within the next 5 years, but we shall see.
Yeah, keep chipping away. Yeah, very good. All right. Well, thanks again to everybody asking questions, and thanks to you, Suzanne, for being patient with us. And it's just really exciting what you've got going on there.
Suzanne,
Yep.
I'm Stout. I'm calling you from Vancouver, Canada. Is there an opportunity for you to type your contact information in the chat, please?
I will add it.
We're with the Vancouver Electric Vehicle Association, and there's a possibility that some of our people might be interested in your presentation too.
Okay.
Very good.
Awesome. And if I could add a few more comments, I think
Sure.
in terms of the electric vehicle conversation, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the EV market grows, or slowly maybe it grows or doesn't grow in such rural communities. There's, I think, only, as far as I know, one charging station in that whole 27,000 square mile setup. Like the Hopi Nation has one at their hotel. And so we've actually been eyeing some trucks, and we're so curious how they're going to perform in the community. Obviously, the longer range would be really amazing. And, you know, thinking about individual home solar charging ports. And a lot of our team is really interested in learning more about the solar charging components. And I think I've heard from other folks that are trying to develop economic opportunities, economic development areas, thinking about solar carport, electric vehicle charging stations. So it's definitely of interest to some community members. So I'm kind of curious to see how it all plays out in the future.
Right. Yeah, that's one thing that we've heard about. I haven't seen quite as much as I'd hoped for, but to have car charging stations that are solar powered, possibly with batteries, that helps buffer the supply and demand of electricity. And so that's good that you're starting to think about those. So yeah, range, of course, is a consideration when you've got homes that are so far apart from each other. Yeah. All right. Very good. Thank you very much. And you're welcome to stay on. We're going to switch over to talking with our friends in Canada there. And so it's really exciting to hear what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So yeah, let's move north of the border. And did you have a particular PowerPoint or anything that you wanted to refer to, or we can just go at it?
Bonjour, je m'appelle Bruce Stout. J'ai habité le nord de North America au Canada. That's my
Canada.
fractured French. I thought I'd have a little fun with you because we're supposed to be.
Sure, I like that "Oh Canada" part, yeah.
So I didn't bring a presentation at all because I don't know how I would follow Suzanne. She did an excellent job. I was really impressed with what she had to say.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to think. But it would be interesting to get her to do a presentation to our group too, because I think we have First Nations here, and the First Nations on Vancouver Island. Susan and I drove across Canada in 2015. So we drove a rear-wheel drive Tesla Model S with an 85 kilowatt-hour battery pack from North Vancouver, where we live, which is just a suburb of the city of Vancouver, all the way to Halifax, Nova Scotia, and back.
Oh,
Our passports at home so that we wouldn't cheat by dipping into the United States where there was more charging stations.
but you did go through Quebec.
Oh, well, yeah, we got all through Quebec, yeah. There was a company called Sun Country Highway that had bought the Clipper Creek charging stations and was marketing them in Canada. And the president of Sun Country Highway in 2012 drove a Tesla Roadster across Canada. He drove it all the way to the East Coast and back to, he drove the entire Trans-Canada Highway from Halifax, Nova Scotia, all the way to Tofino on Vancouver Island, which is sort of mile or kilometer zero of the Trans-Canada Highway.
Hmm.
And he then had something called the E-Amazing Race that he sponsored in 2014. And a series of people entered that race. The winner of that race was actually a couple from California with a Tesla. And in 2015, I said to Susan, how would you like to go to Halifax for your birthday? And she said, fine, I used to work for the airline. We'll just fly over there. She said, no. I said, no, we're taking the car. So we drove the car across Canada. Fortunately for me, Susan is very, very astute at these things. So she planned out the entire trip using Microsoft Maps software, knew exactly where we should stay. We had a list of all the Tesla superchargers and the Sun Country Highway superchargers, because there were Tesla superchargers in Red Deer, Alberta. And as you moved east, the next one was was in Ontario. I wanted to say Brampton, but that's not correct. It was another city in Ontario. And the distance between those Tesla superchargers was probably about 5,000 kilometers or a little over 3,000 miles.
Oh.
So the entire trip return was 19,000 kilometers. So half of that would be about 9,000 kilometers. So we're talking maybe about 6,000 miles each direction. So we got used to pulling into a charging station. And fortunately, our car had the dual chargers. So we were able to charge at the rate of 72 kilometers an hour. Now, about 50 miles an hour is what we were getting on these charging stations. And that was the rate that an AC charging station was giving us. And that was a 72 amp charging station. So what that boils down to is a 3-hour lunch to do 200 and some odd kilometers. And that translates into, what is it, 5/8? So we'd be talking about 150 miles for the 3-hour lunch, 50 miles an hour of charging. And then we planned to stay overnight in motels and hotels that had charging stations. Interestingly enough, in Moncton, New Brunswick, the charging station is a owner of a gasoline station. He owns the gasoline station. He also owned a Tesla. He owned a couple of gasoline stations. He had a Sun Country Highway charger, 72 amp, put in at each of those fossil fuel gasoline stations. And we went through Moncton 3 times when we were going to Prince Edward Island, etc. So it was an interesting trip, fascinating trip, in fact. And the last part of the trip, and the reason I'm telling this story, is we happened to go over to Vancouver Island because we needed some more charging station stops in order to win this race and have the most charging station stops, because some guy that lived in Ontario and had never left the province was winning the race. He was ahead of me. He'd stopped at more charging stations, but he hadn't left Ontario. Ontario is a fairly big province. I don't know, California, Oregon, Washington, maybe Idaho would all fit into it. So it's a fairly big land area. But I said, no, this is not on. I'm going to go to Vancouver Island, where I knew there was 24 charging stations, and I'm going to plug into all of them and win this race. So one of the charging stations was at a First Nations location where they had a Nissan Leaf as their band office car, and they put in 12 kilowatts of charging stations. And I thought, God, these guys are just so brilliant. This is back in 2015 they were doing this. Now, it isn't that they were off grid because they had grid there, but they just did the math and figured it out that it'd be advantageous for them to use the solar panels to charge their electric car, thereby saving them a lot of money. I don't know whether you know much about the Canadian dollar exchange right now, but $1.30 Canadian buys $1 US. Our fossil fuel price right now is $1.88. So we're paying roughly, I don't know what that would work out to in your money, $1.30, $1.88. We're probably paying about $1.20 US to buy a liter of fuel. What's your fuel price in Houston right now? Or do any of you still know?
Yeah, well, we drive past them because there's so many fueling stations, and I think it's just a little bit under $3 per gallon. So you have
Okay,
to.
and a gallon is 3.75 liters.
Yeah.
4 liters. So you're paying less than, you're paying about 85 cents a liter.
Right.
We're paying $1.20 US for a liter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a lot of Canadians that live close to the border. They'll go to a place called Point Roberts, or they'll go to Blaine, Washington, and fill their car with gas, buy milk, buy eggs, buy cheese, because it's a little cheaper. So that's things that happens. So anyway, that's sort of a short summary of that. Now, do you have any questions for me?
Oh, I'm sure we've got folks with questions for you here. All right, who'd like to start off? Well, I'm wondering more about your club. So
Sure, go ahead.
How are things organized? Do you have monthly meetings? Do you have some folks both online and in person? How do you do that?
Actually, Zoom has been a godsend for us, because when this pandemic hit in February, March of 2020, we discovered Zoom, and we had Zoom meetings with about 35 to 40 people attending. Prior to that, we used to have what rebates, tax credits, etc. do you have in BC? Okay, get to that in a minute, Robert. So it was kind of a shock to our system because we couldn't meet anymore. So we started off with Zoom, and we have a Zoom meeting on Tuesday night, and you're all welcome to attend that. And that goes from 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock, which would be 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock your time, because I'm adding 2 hours. We have a meeting on Saturday, which goes from 10 to 12, which would be 12 to 1, 12 to 2 your time. And the attendance has kind of dropped off because it's starting to get nicer here now. We're coming out of our igloos. So we don't live in igloos. We don't have ice bears in the streets. It's okay. So that's really what we're doing to try and keep the club alive, try and keep interest in people.
So you have meetings both on Tuesdays and Saturdays?
Oh yeah, we don't have a life. We get different people at those meetings, because some people that are involved in other I believe it or not, they're involved in other activities but electric cars. So they'll be involved in other activities on a Tuesday, but they can attend the Saturday. Can't attend the Saturday, but they can attend the Tuesday. So we welcome everybody to the organization. Our goal at the end of the day is similar to your goal, is to try and explain to people that electric cars aren't really that radical. They're just a car. It just has a different fueling system.
Sure. So you did mention like first, second, third. Do you do Tuesday and Saturday every week?
Yeah. As I said, don't have a life.
Okay.
So one of the things that we used to do in our big event was something called Electra Fest.
Okay.
And we've been doing that for, well over 20 years. We had a local property developer that would give us his site for $1, and we just have to buy the insurance, and we gather all of our members together. So we'd have a situation where we get all the local car dealers to show up. We got 3 or 4 of them to show up when they started to get electric cars that they could sell back in 2015, 2016 timeframe. And before that, we were just getting members to show up with their cars and doing this. And we did it long before that. So there was a period of time where the Vancouver Electric Vehicle Association was focused around our primary asset, which is a 1912 Detroit Electric 100% electric car
Yeah.
that was built in 1912 as more or less a 2013 model.
Uh-huh.
It used the new novel Edison iron nickel batteries, which used a basic substance to run the batteries.
Mhm.
The local husband and wife that owned those in Victoria, BC, he was a veterinarian and it was his wife's daily driver. He passed on sometime during the 1950s or something like that. She died in the 1960s, mid 1960s. But prior to that time, they lived in the Empress Hotel in Victoria, and the car was cared for by the garage operator in Victoria in the actual hotel. He'd bring it up to the portico. She'd get in the car. She'd drive around Victoria. She was known as the Dowager of the Empress in her electric vehicle. And we actually met her nephew who used to ride in the car. So that was rather interesting. When in 2012, we brought the car over to Victoria, and we had an event there. The longest the car is actually driven under its own power, I would say, was about 45 kilometers. And every year, and this was in 2012, every year the Sunshine Coast Hot Rod Association would host a Sleepy Hollow rod run. And this would start off in a city called Seashelt and go to a city called Half Moon Bay. And we'd go for this ride every year. And we were the last car that one year in this parade of 350 hot rods. The car would be on display that evening in the field, and then all the vehicles would take off. And we were able to do this. The last car behind us, of course, was the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which was kind of nice. We had a police escort.
Yeah.
So there was my wife and myself and another gentleman, First Nations gentleman, by the way, named Villamere George, who was riding along with us. He got the ride of his life. So that's just some of the things that the club's done. We were for a while, they're promoting a lot of electric bicycles because electric cars weren't there. Electric cars started to show up. 2010, there was an Olympics in Vancouver. So that got a lot of interesting things happened. Nissan came to Vancouver with the mule for the Nissan Leaf, and they showed a Nissan Leaf prototype. Chevrolet came along with the Chevrolet Volt, VOLT, and a couple of other things were happening. And we got a chance to see some of that. So that's when we started to get things happening. One of our members bought himself a Tesla Roadster, and he would bring that to our Electrofest, and we'd run up and down in that. It was almost a full G of acceleration on that Tesla Roadster. Really an interesting car. And the Mitsubishi IMEVs came over. The city of Vancouver bought a couple of them from Mitsubishi. Were right-hand drive cars out of Japan. And they just decided, would this thing work? It was about a 60-mile car with a total range. So it wasn't a car that went very far. But how far are you going to go in a city? And they discovered that rather than spending $14 to drive a gasoline-powered car to do city errands and things like that, we're talking the inspection department, maybe traffic department, they could run these things for $2 for 60 miles. So when they saw the difference in price and they saw what these cars would cost, and they took a look at the maintenance, at the end of the program, where you could still get a Mitsubishi IMEV in Canada, they had 35 vehicles in their fleet. So this, and we had one of those that come out there. The best part of our whole deal happened in 2019, where one of our members was also working for the municipal government. And we have a government structure in there. We have separate cities that have municipalities or have government structures. And we also had an over body, which would be the body that was the regional district, which would be all those municipalities looking after sewer, water, and some other things for those municipalities. And they had an initiative to do with environment, and this person was working for that. So they seconded him to us to help run our program for 2 years. So 2018, 2019, he ran the program. And we changed the location. We had all kinds of dealers show up and do test drives. It was really quite the show. And of course, in 2020, we'd planned to do the same thing. COVID hit, shut down. 2021 shut down. This is 2022 shut down. So here we are with 2023, and what are we going to do? Well, there was supposed to be an auto show in Vancouver in March. It got canceled because the dealers weren't interested. And the reason the dealers aren't interested, if you go to any dealer in Vancouver now and tell them you want to buy an electric car, they say, that's nice. Would you like to put in an order? And we say, oh yeah, we'd like to put in an order. We'd give them a deposit, $500 or whatever it was. And they say, fine, we'll see you in about 6 months, or we'll see you in 3 years, depending upon what you're ordering.
Yeah.
I just went and did a little quick search here while I was getting ready for this. And I looked up what it would cost to get a Tesla Model 3. So the Tesla Model 3 in Canada is, what do we got here? About 55,000 Canadian dollars. Now, I don't know how that compares to the US price, but it's 1.3 times the US price.
And does your pricing include tax? A sales tax?
Oh no, $55,000 is tax out.
Ah, okay.
Tax on
In
top of
European pricing, you always have to allow for it, but okay.
Yeah, well, Canadian pricing is the same as US pricing. The taxes are always added later.
Okay.
So we have two taxes in British Columbia. We have a 7% provincial sales tax and a 5% federal sales tax. Unfortunately for us, they are not cumulative. They're added separately. So it's totals 12% sales tax on that vehicle. Now, the reason I talk about a Tesla Model 3 is the Tesla Model 3 qualifies for a federal government and a provincial government rebate that total $9,000.
Ah.
The caveat is you can get a federal government rebate on that car every year.
Oh.
As far as a provincial rebate is concerned, that's once per lifetime per person. And you have to prove that your income is less than 80,000 Canadian dollars in order to get that rebate. So it's income tested. As far as the Model Y is concerned, you're fortunate. You can get a rebate on a Model Y. We can't. Model Y is considered a $70,000 vehicle. It's too expensive to get a rebate. So that's a bit of the market. So one of the things that's happening is the dealers do not have to promote electric vehicles. They just as soon sell what's available today, sell you what's on the lot. So they weren't interested in participating in an electric vehicle show. So the Vancouver International Auto Show didn't happen this year. Fully Charged Live is coming in September to Vancouver.
Nice.
Yeah.
And the person that used to run the International Auto Show for the new car dealers of British Columbia is the person working with Robert Llewellyn to bring Fully Charged Live to Vancouver. Electricity in British Columbia comes from what we call a Crown Corporation, and that's a corporation that's run at loose ends by the government. And the Crown Corporation is called BC Hydro, and it gets its name because 96% of the energy it sells is from falling water.
Good.
And as you probably know, British Columbia is noted for a lot of falling water.
Yeah.
So that's just a core dump for me. Now, have we found anybody who's brave enough to ask a question?
Well, I'd like to go back to that 1912 Baker. Is that owned by the club or a member of the club?
Well, okay, it's a 1912 Detroit Electric.
Detroit.
And what was happening in 1988, which is one of the reasons for the founding of Vancouver Electric Vehicle Association, is the provincial government changed, and the new provincial government decided that British Columbia really didn't need a transportation museum. So they took the assets of the BC Transportation Museum and decided to auction them off. We heard about this. 4 of our original members of the club, decided this was not on because we didn't really want it to go to Jay Leno's collection or something like that. So we stepped up and said to the government, hey, we'll give you $1, give us the car. So the title of the car transferred over to the Vancouver Electric Vehicle Association. So it is our club's asset valued at 60,000 Canadian dollars.
Yeah.
Well, how are you going to value a 20? How you value a 1912 Detroit Electric?
Right.
Forget it. There's one in the world. That's it. So how do you put a value on it? But we got somebody to put a value on it for us. Normally, it lives at the Stave Lake Power Dam Museum. So there's the lake in the eastern part of the Lower Mainland called the Stave Lake, and the Stave Lake runs into a power dam that was built in 1912.
Ah.
That power dam is now a museum because next door they built the new power dam.
Yeah.
And this power dam, the original power dam had 3 penstocks. After the First World War, they finished the shipping of the 4th generator, so it's got 4 penstocks there. You've probably seen it in all sorts of movies. It's sort of an old building with these all kinds of huge pieces of machinery in it. And in this building is where we normally store this when the museum is open from March to October. What's happened to it this year is one of our members, who's probably the only living person that understands intimately the workings of this car, has taken it upon himself to fashion a new drum controller. And what a drum controller system, if you watch my hands, you see they're moving like this.
Yeah.
Take a drum that would look like any kind of, I'm trying to think what I've got here. Here we go. We'll use, this is the drum, okay? The fingers that would move on the drum. And there would be plates on this drum. And what the plates on the drum would do would be connect the electricity from the 72 volts. Originally, it was 72 volts iron nickel battery with a basic substance running them. We've since replaced those. We found a set of iron nickel batteries out of China, and we've got a 72 volt system with some batteries in the front, some batteries in the back, and a 72 volt charger, because this particular individual made his living by designing 12 volt chargers for golf carts. I don't know whether you know this or not, but golf carts do not have a charger on them. Golf carts come in from the golf course and they get connected to a charger after somebody's taken a hose and washed them all down to clean them all up. They then to go into a storage shed with a whole series of golf carts. Somebody reaches up to the ceiling, pulls down a charge cord, plugs it into the golf cart, and that's how they're charged. So his company designed and made all of these chargers to charge golf carts and sold them all over North America. Anyway, so he's the person that does the care and feeding. We've redone the brakes just recently. We've redone a whole thing of stuff. To better expand charging stations in apartment complexes. Oh God, that's a really good question. Let me just scoot to the chat for a second here. Rebates, tax credits you got. So you got the rebates, tax credit answered. Okay. What is being done in Vancouver to expand charging stations in apartment complexes? What about a business and workplaces? So this is one of our biggest challenges. We've made several discussions with people as to what should be done. And I'm talking, we have a person by the name of Robert Sparks, who we're totally volunteer. Nobody gets paid in Viva, okay? So it's his job to deal with the government. He's called the government relations person. And he's been on a whole series of meetings with people, government people that we find from time to time. And he talks to them about some of the things that we need to be done to help advance the adoption of electric vehicles. Canada, like a lot of countries, has sort of suggested that by 2035, we wouldn't be selling any new fossil fueled vehicles. So this is in some cases a nice dream. In a lot of cases, what's going to happen, and this is my personal prediction, well before 2030, we're going to see people not wanting to buy anything but electric vehicles. Now, I realize this is possibly heresy in your part of the world, down there in the oil capital of the United States. But I noticed that I have people on this call that are driving electric vehicles. And I don't know how many people are on the call because I only see 3 faces other than my wife.
Well, we've only got a few on Zoom, but in the room we've got 12. Yeah.
Well, there's a whole bunch of people that haven't asked these questions yet.
Yeah.
So one of our challenges has been the multi-unit residential building, or MURB, or strata-titled building. And the way you solve that problem, if you're in one of those, is you join the strata council. As a matter of fact, if you're even smarter, you become the president of the strata council and you get your buddies on the strata council, because strata councils are a non-paid position. They can be an onerous duty because you get phone calls all the time of people who've got problems they want you to solve. So if you can do that and you can convince the members of the strata council that what they need to do is to allow you to install charging stations to start with, That's really good. And of course, the way you do this is you explain to people that right now we're going into an extremely difficult real estate situation in Canada.
Oh,
I don't know about you guys, but there's this country to the south of us, that would be you, that has increased their interest rate exponentially. There's some guy who runs something called the, what is it called now? Something to do with the Fed?
yes.
A private company that prints your money and sets your interest rates. So in Canada, we have to kind of match your interest rates because otherwise all the Canadian capital will flow south.
Yeah.
So people that have mortgages on property have all of a sudden discovered that the price of their mortgage, if they have to refinance, is doubled. Their monthly payments have doubled. So, and the whole real estate thing is getting really complicated. But prior to last year, real estate prices in Vancouver went absolutely stupid during the COVID because people took the money that they would spend on travel and remodeled their houses and upgraded their houses. And so the real estate people would list a house for sale and they would have 20 or 30 people go through that house and they would have multiple offers, and just about every house they ever listed sold above asking. It was totally crazy.
Yeah.
That's started to slow down now, but what people in strata buildings are starting to understand that if the government is suggesting we're all going to be driving electric cars by 2030 or 2035, you're going to have to compete to sell your apartment in a strata or a MERB building. And one of the things people are going to be asking is, where do I plug in my electric car?
Yeah.
Well, if your building is an old building and doesn't have that, they're going to say, thank you very much. I enjoyed looking at your building, but since I can't plug in my electric car, goodbye.
Yeah.
What we suggested to people is if you don't bite the bullet and get that electric car charging station roughed in or at least looked at now, the prices are going to keep going up every year because it's called inflation. So you have to start looking at this seriously, getting this done. One of the problems we've got is a lot of these buildings, the older buildings, are populated by older people who are looking at how much longer am I going to drive, or am I still driving? And does it make sense for me to help somebody put in an electric vehicle charging? So what we're saying to people, look, if you can't get buy-in from the Strata Council, approach them this way. Basically, you'll give them $30 a month to use the 120 that's there in the building, or two, you will pay the cost of putting in the charging station that's attached to your particular unit. So when you come to sell your unit, you will get more money for your unit and your unit will sell faster.
Yeah.
So that's the approach we've been using. We've been talking to the government about doing what California did, in Hawaii did, which is the right to charge in a strata building. They passed legislation, to my understanding. And the way the legislation was worded is that the Strata Council could not prevent you from putting in a charging station in your attached to your unit, as long as the electrical load of the building would allow that to happen.
Okay.
One of our members has got a patent on a device that load shares. So I think you understand what load sharing is all about.
Sure. Yeah.
Yep. So you plug in 5 cars and the device goes and analyzes the state of charge of those 5 cars and says, okay, all these 5 cars have got to be fully charged or 80% charged by 8 o'clock in the morning. So I'm going to charge the car with the lowest state of charge first, and I'm going to move through the whole stack. So I'm not all of a sudden got a peak where I have a peak of charge current that's necessary to charge all the cars at once. And then around 4 o'clock in the morning, that peak starts to drop off. So let's try and level the peak. Let's try and load balance.
Yep. Very smart. Glad to hear that he patented that. Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you know what a patent is all about. How do you enforce a patent?
Well, yeah. So, okay.
Questions? Any other questions?
So, someone else here in the room, or we?
I was wondering, anything that I mean, we've heard some of it, but anything in terms of like electricity rates or like municipal charging stations that you're particularly proud of or disappointed in, that the like Vancouver government's done?
Well, we've been fairly fortunate in that it's an interesting situation that happened in Vancouver. Tesla's been quite active here because they're selling a lot of cars in BC. And for the population base, the population of British Columbia is around 5 million people. The population of the lower mainland is probably around 3 million people. And Tesla's been very successful selling cars into this market. So they've put in charging stations in various locations and been very successful in doing that. One of the first charging stations in Canada was in a place called Squamish, which was on the way to Whistler. So a lot of people would come up from California and want to go skiing in Whistler. So that was why that charging station went in. The other one that was important was one that went in Red Deer. There's a third charging station that I'm trying to remember the name of the place, but it's in Alberta also. And the reason it's there, and it was there early, is because a certain young gentleman who owns a little electric car company in California spent his 18th birthday on the ranch that was in that city. I'm talking about Elon Musk, of course.
Yeah.
So what's happened here is the city of Vancouver government has a person that actively works on the file of electrifying things. Remember, the city of Vancouver bought 35 Mitsubishi IMEVs over a period of time. So they're all over electric cars and they understand what it's all about. But they haven't done a lot of city of Vancouver charging stations, with the exception of a few situations. The city of Vancouver parking lot, which is right below the city of Vancouver, installed 4 charging stations, but in the beginning offered you free parking and charging for electric vehicles during city time. It's now reached the point where everybody pays to use those charging stations because the congestion was too much. Sure. I'm going to give you free parking for your electric car, and I'm going to give you free charging.
Yeah.
If you want an electric car, you're going to be there. And all of a sudden there's going to be lineups because, hey, it's free parking and it's free charging. Yeah. So now it's no longer free parking or free charging.
Yeah.
So now the people that actually need the charge are able to get it. So Tesla was looking for a location for a charging station in Vancouver. And there's a thing called Pacific Center, which is a fairly large shopping center with underground parking. And they looked at the electrical load of what it would allow to have. So the city of Vancouver owns the parking rights to that building. So when they built that building, the building owners that built the building traded off to get permitting to build the building, the parking rights for Easy Park, which is the city-owned parking company, to run that building. So they put in 22 75 kilowatt Tesla chargers. Now they could have put in maybe 14 120 kilowatt chargers, but they insisted on the 75 kilowatt because they could get more chargers there than they had in Toronto, Ontario, in one particular location. So people are. So they wanted to have more than Toronto did because there's this rivalry. It would be the rivalry between, I don't know, Houston and New York.
Something, yeah.
Something like that. So you can understand the rivalry. So anyway, we have lots of charging stations. A local pharmacy, a drugstore called London Drugs, which is a drugstore like, I don't know, you've got drugstores down there that sell everything. That's what London Drugs does. They have a camera department. They do pharmacy. They have a computer department. You name it, they do it all. And there's 8 charging stations they put in for Tesla. They've now added another 4, and they've added 2 that are a J1772 plug off a Tesla wall adapter. So and it's very popular. The reason they went from 8 to add the other 4 to go to 12 is because it's full all the time.
Okay.
So usually a 1-person lineup there, and it's on what we call the main highway that goes from Burnaby through North Vancouver all the way up to the ferries that go to Vancouver Island and to Squamish and up to Whistler. Mm-hmm. So lots of charging stations are appearing. The fossil fuel companies, Shell, Petro-Canada, Chevron, who else is there that sells fossil fuel?
No, Exxon is a big one here.
Exxon's a big one. Now we don't see a lot of Exxon up here. We see Mobil. is the other one that's coming up now that bought the local one. But all of these people are putting in charging stations, and the smart one is a company called Parkland that bought the Chevron, standard Chevron, same idea,
Yeah.
Chevron stations. And they've partnered with a restaurant chain called White Spot, which has been around this part of the world for over 90 years. And they're doing it on the run. So if you go to a Chevron fossil fuel station, you can buy a quick hamburger and a bunch of other stuff from a White Spot on the run. And White Spot's got a very good reputation, very good quality. So they're looking at putting in charging stations in Chevron stations. So they're going to put the Chevron fossil fuel stations will now have charging stations, and they'll have an on the run. And I'm thinking that they're going for a quick charge station. So it'll happen faster. You have Electrify America, part of the Volkswagen scandal and the Volkswagen atonement for the gate. We have Electrify Canada, same difference, because they do some atonement up here too. Put in some charging stations in Squamish, just north of where the other ones are. That is my 3 minutes to 6. My wife telling me that we have to go.
Yeah, I understood you had a time constraint, so.
That's our time constraint. So you got 5 minutes, shoot. I'm so sorry, you've got 5 minutes. Please ask questions. Sounds so much.
Yeah.
Is the Detroit Electric running?
Not only is it running, but it got a new set of batteries 2 years ago. It's had its brakes repaired. It probably runs better now than when it was new. The challenge we've got is somebody's actually sat down and figured out how unique the vehicle is. So we had opportunities to put it in a parade. Well, you know that a parade is very hard on a controller, because going back to my little analogy here, here's the controller. It's a drum controller, and these are the fingers on the drum controller. And it doesn't have the anti-spark capability, because we tried to keep it as original as possible. So you're putting an awful lot of wear on a vehicle by doing that sort of stuff. So we'll have it on a static display at Fully Charged Live in Vancouver in September. I'm personally trying to get it every opportunity I can so people can see it, because when somebody looks and they see a vehicle that was built in 1912, still operational, still running, and what is this, 2023? So how old is this vehicle now?
Old, yeah.
Well, 111 years old, right? So don't tell me that electric vehicles won't last. Don't tell me that batteries won't last, because the original iron nickel batteries made by Edison Corporation in 1912 lasted in excess of 25 years in this vehicle.
It's common for Edison batteries to last 30, I understand.
Yeah. Oh yeah, well,
Do you have any videos of the vehicle? I mean,
go to our website, VEVA-CA, VEV, Vancouver Electric Vehicle Association.ca. Go to our website, look up the Vancouver Electric Vehicle Association. Look at
great.
Electric. There's all sorts of stuff. Members to our organization who've given us the $25 Canadian, and we actually have a member out of California named Lawrence, get to go and look behind the scenes and see all the extensive information we have.
What do we have to give to drive it?
Well, you have to go through a training course to get to drive it. And that only happens maybe once a year. We haven't done it for a while. But you join the organization and show up, and you can probably get to drive it. I don't know whether you're going to get to drive it. If you come up to Fully Charged Live in Vancouver, the vehicle has to come off a trailer and go into Fully Charged Live, which will be the Vancouver Convention Center West. And look up Fully Charged Live Vancouver. I'll give you the dates. Those of you who have Tesla Model Ys, just throw a mattress in the back. You've got a great place to sleep.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Okay, anybody else with a question here? Got a couple minutes and then I got to go.
What is the electricity rate? So Canadian cents per kilowatt hour.
Oh, you guys are going to feel real bad now. I pay 11.5 cents for the first tier of electricity. And that goes up to 15 cents for the second tier of electricity. Unfortunately, we do not have an overnight rate that they do in some places. So if I was in Ontario, it would be 6 cents a kilowatt hour overnight.
Okay, yeah, good to have it drop down at night. Here,
Yeah.
it's quite a complex situation. We have retail electric providers and some have time of use plans and some don't, and it gets complex very quickly here.
Yeah, ours is pretty simple. It's the British Columbia Hydro organization, and BC Hydro card charges us so much per kilowatt hour based on the AC meter that sits outside of the house. And it's now a smart meter, so we can actually go in and see how much power we've used.
Do you have some members with PV on the roofs, photovoltaics?
Oh, God, yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah, that's a no-brainer. I unfortunately live in the shadow of my neighbor's roof. And there's a lot of trees in the area. It's North Vancouver. So I'm quite shaded where I'm located. But I have one good friend who's got 12 kilowatts on his garage. And he's driving his Tesla Model 3 on sunshine.
All right. Yeah, if you're familiar with it, Teslas require you to put a name in, or you can put a name in. And my first Tesla is called EV plus PV.
Excellent. Yep.
So, yeah, so I see it's a couple of minutes past the hour. So we really appreciate your time. And yeah, we'll be looking at your website and talking with you further. So
thank you
thanks a
very
lot.
much. Thank you for letting me come to your meeting. Thank you very much for the presenter that you brought to your meeting. She was fascinating.
Yes, she was very good. I'm really glad that we got her too. So,
good night, everybody.
All righty. Good night. All right. So, Andrew, we'll turn the camera on you. It's like turning the spotlight on you. And so you have something you want to plug in that we can play? Sure. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Run the PowerPoint. You got your hub there. Okay.
Hi, I'm Andrew. Most of y'all know that. Let's see here. I'm going to be presenting on my Solectria Force project. It's going to be real quick. It's a 1997 Solectria Force sedan. Okay. Well, anywho, a little bit about myself. I have owned, man.
Here above where you are now, in the file structure. I saw it there before you jumped down into the folder.
Oh, yeah, right there.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah. Yep, it's gonna be the big file. Yeah, exactly. It has exactly. It has a video on it. We'll see if it plays. I've owned 4 different electric vehicles at this point. One was the Solectria. This is the first one. I had a Nissan Leaf, which was Emma's. Then I had a Bolt for 2 years. Absolutely love that car. Drove it from here to Baltimore and back, and then many other places. And now I have a 2022 Kia EV6, which I've driven from here to San Diego and back only like a month after I bought it. Yep, exactly. So this project has been a long time coming. I got the car from a previous member. I don't remember his name. I think it was Alfred or something like that. Anyway, about 5 years ago, and that was before I had any sort of money to work with. So it sat in the lean-to for a good couple years after I got a couple exactly. After I did a couple things to it, but I'll show that in the PowerPoint. Okay, you can go to the next slide, please. So this is the Solectria that I got and how I got it. It was not driving with 13 lead acid 100 amp hour battery modules in it. It was 9 in the back 4 in the front. I'll have some pictures later on about that too. On the left, there's a data sheet from Solectria about what it was capable of. They said the range was 50 miles at 45 miles an hour. No one's driving 45 miles an hour in Houston. And I think I saw in the manual that I have about 20 miles at 60 miles an hour. So, and that's going through about 15-ish kilowatt hours. Yeah, exactly. Let's see here. What else? Oh, it did have a nickel metal hydride option. This one was not. All of them came standard as white. You can't see in the pictures, but there's some sort of faint holographic on the back. It looked like the car was owned and operated by a state in the Rust Belt. I don't remember the name of the state, but that's why the car's green. And then it was owned by someone here in Houston. I think it was by some sort of electric association here. But I don't know that much about the history of the car. Besides, it was missing both mirrors also. All right, let's go to the next slide, please. Here on the, y'all's left is a picture of the, man, I don't remember what it's called. Anyway, the information, the specs about the controller on the left and then on the motor on the right. I took pictures because at this point, both of those plaques are completely faded away now. Let's go to the next slide, please. So here's the back battery box. It had 9 of those modules in there. If you go to the next slide, it'll show it opened up. And it was a mess. Yeah, anywho. And then if you go to the next slide, please. That was the front. And then the controller is the one with the red Solectria on it. And underneath that, that white plastic, it had 4 more batteries or battery modules under there. If you go to the next slide, please. Right there. Lead acid, those suckers are heavy. They were 100 pounds each. I weighed them. And then if you go to the next slide, I took them all out, trickle charged them. The guy who I got the car from said that the car had sat for, man, I think it sat for 5 years before I got it. So those batteries were toast. They were dead. I did trickle charge them, continued to monitor them, make sure they didn't heat up. Trickle charged them until they wouldn't charge anymore. And then put them all back in the car to see what would happen, just to make sure, just to see if the controller and motor were still functional. If you go to the next slide. Okay, so here is the video. It doesn't have to have sound. We'll see if it plays too. Nope. Okay. Anyway, I have the video on my phone if any of y'all want to see it later on. But I did get it to move, and it moved pretty much down to the end of my driveway and back, and that was it. Before the lead acid just conked out. So I took all those out, still have them, I need to recycle them. But if you go to the next slide.
That was Rick Erling.
Was that who that was? Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't know too much or didn't remember too much about it. And then so after I took the modules out, it sat for 5 years in my garage. So I didn't have any budget to do anything with it. It did not sit with the window down. But if you go to the next slide, please. At the end of 2022, some of y'all may know Jehu from YouTube. He did the electric VW bus. He has his own company, Jag 35, and he sells a bunch of different types of battery modules. I ended up buying 13 of these LifePo 4 battery modules. They're 4S 2P 50 amp hour modules. So a total of 4S 100 amp hour modules. If you go to the next one, please. So the original battery specs, nominal voltage was 156. The new one nominal is 166. One of the reasons why I went with the pouch cells versus cylindrical 18650s was one, with the 18650s, it would have been way more complicated because I would have had to either spot weld or figure out some sort of system to hook all those series up and then parallel as well. With the pouch, it was much more plug and play, 1313 easy. Still 100 amp hours with the new one. It was 100 amp hour with the old one. The weight, that was a huge difference. So the old one weighed 1,300 pounds. The new one almost weighs 1,000 pounds less than that. The car does stand a little bit higher now. The range was estimated on the data sheet at 50 miles at 45 miles an hour. The ones under the new pack specs are only estimates because I haven't actually run the car that long. I'll get to that later on. If you go to the next slide, please. By the way, this whole thing was put together like 20 minutes ago, so forgive me if there's issues. This is what it looks like now. I ended up putting enough space in the rear just because the modules were small enough. I just didn't want them under the front. So I had space to maybe put a air conditioning system in later on. So now that front battery box is empty and just way more space to work with. I want to add, as I said, AC system in there, not only for comfort, but mainly for battery conditioning and longevity. The LiPo 4 batteries or LiFo 4 batteries are estimated at 5,000 cycles. I did rough back in the napkin math. For 5,000 cycles at 40 miles of range, so that's 60 miles an hour, that's still 200,000 miles. So if I can put some sort of battery thermal management system in there, I'm sure that'll help with that lifespan too. Currently, this is the elephant in the room. There is no BMS on it. I don't know what I'm going to do BMS wise. This project is budget limited, and I'm not even sure how long the car will stay together. It was in the rust belt and there's significant amount of rust underneath it. And when I drove it this morning after I got it functioning and moving, I got it up to about 30 miles an hour and smelled something burning. It ended up being, exactly, that was my thought too. So yeah, very concerned. It ended up being the front left brake caliper was sticking. That was such a relief. It's like, that I can fix versus electrical. Anyway, so I think, is that, oh, I have one more slide. So that was the lead acid stance and then the LiPo 4-bit stance. So yeah, that's about it. That's about it. Yeah, that was a paid actor. Questions?
The battery purchase, Garcia, did not come with BMS?
They did not, but they came up. I have also more pictures on my phone, but they came in a module of 4S2P with two main standoffs and then a hookup for a BMS. So you can hook up a BMS to it. And that's actually how I charged them, because they came to me all different states of charge. I charged them all up with a power supply to the exact same standard voltage. So I top balanced them. I would like to see if I can go without a BMS, because the LiPo 4 chemistry is a whole lot more stable than the cylindrical 18650s. But we'll see.
So you're thinking thermal management, blowing cold air?
Kind of like a Nissan Leaf, except better.
So
Yeah, as far as that goes. The original battery system also had a thermal management, but only for heating. And all that was a heating, pretty much a heating pad underneath the lead acid to keep them warm.
So you don't have access to each of the 4 cell voltages unless you open the
That's exactly right. Well, actually, no. So the modules, I do have access to the individual cell voltages. So the way the module is set up is it's kind of bolted in there with so they're tabs. I'm sorry, they're pouch cells with tabs for the negative and positive. And then they have those tabs bent over and then sandwiched between two pieces of metal to be in the module. And then on top of that, you see bolts and that are keeping those pieces of metal together. And that's how I'm able to access the individual cell voltages.
Did you say it's 4S, 4P?
4S 2P. So each individual cell is 50 amp hour. So the whole system is 50 something S. I don't remember off the top of my head. 2P.
Does JAG recommend any BMS?
He does. And I looked at the BMS that he recommended and at the scale that I would need it. Also, the one that he recommends is mainly just for 12 volt, 12 volt or 24 volt systems for solid state storage where it's like home backup or whatever kind of backup you need, not a 160 something volt system.
What kind, do you remember the brand?
I don't, not off the top of my head. I have the link on my phone again.
So it'd be pretty expensive.
Yeah, it would almost be the exact same as a, well, I priced it out. It was something like $1,000 to $1,500, maybe a little bit over that. Yeah. What's the BMS you have in yours? Zeva. Okay. I forgot. 2 months ago, who was the presenter we had with the red?
With the Sprite.
Yeah, with the Sprite. I looked at the BMS that he had in his car, and that's one of the top end BMSs that you can, hook up and edit all the functions on it. And that's also about that 1,500 to $2,000.
Which one does he have? Is it Orion?
Yeah, Orion.
The last one is got lithium. There's like those three.
Yeah, there's not many options.
Can't. The problem is it's old because I think it's 52.
52S. Yeah.
So that's
It's exactly because it's trying to imitate that lead acid voltage. Oh, but it's that higher voltage. Yeah.
You're using the stock Solectria charger for it?
Good question. No. So there was a charger in there by Quick Charge, I think it is. It's a 3 something, probably 3.3 kilowatt charger. When no, I lie. It's much less than that because it's only 120 volt. So it can pull whatever the max amperage is out of a 120 volt outlet. But yeah, that's about it. Any other questions?
15 amps.
Yeah, 15 amps. Thank you.
So, I'm sure you're concerned and you're gonna monitor the voltage a lot initially. And I guess that's just a question of accessing the 52 cells, is that right?
That's exactly right.
There is a little thing you can buy for very little money. It's got 9 pins on it, and it's $5 or something like that.
I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Least display automatically knows how many cells it's looking at.
Yep.
And it display. And not only that, I think it beeps if it gets out of range. I'll try to bring one to the next meeting.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I think I remember seeing one of those, and that would be able to hook up to the BMS port on the batteries.
There was an idea back, I think, like 20 years ago, when people were doing lead acid conversion. I forget what it's called. It's called a Lee Hart battery bridge, I think. But the idea is that you split your pack into two and you just have two voltage monitors
Yeah.
and you monitor both sides.
Mhm.
And the idea is if you have a cell imbalance, the two sides will no longer be in balance.
Mhm.
And you'll see a difference, and that will trigger you to go look at your.
Interesting. Okay, I had not heard of that.
If you Google that. And this is like a really cheap way.
To monitor it. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Good. I think you're
Yeah.
inspiring other folks to do their own projects. Yeah.
Yeah. This one has a ways to go. I got to get that brake caliber unstuck. But yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you. Okay. That is so good, and with pictures and everything. Yeah. Okay. So regarding any other announcements, do we have anything else that we've got coming up that folks want to talk about? So as I mentioned, we've got these events on the 22nd, so we will not have a second Thursday. About the lunch or about? Yes. Wanted to bring up what a couple of us have tossed around some ideas. And so something I've wanted to do for a long time was either get together for kilowatts and coffee or batteries and brews or EVs and espressos, another one. Somebody else invented all these. But so some of us that are down in the southeast part of the county, whether it's in or outside of the Houston city limits, doesn't really matter. We're talking about starting down there and getting something together once a month. And a couple of different places. One that would be relatively easy for a lot of folks in Houston to get to would be off of I-45, where the Baybrook Mall is. And there's some places to get together there. And there's charging opportunities at the free Volta chargers. Most of them are level 2. I think one is a fast charger. But not necessarily that we want to be near the chargers, because they're a little bit spread out and it's hard to see the cars. We're also talking about in the parking lot by Whiskey Cake, because that way we could park a bunch of cars together. And during nice weather, of course, people can bring their thermoses with coffee and so forth. If it was early, if it's late, inside of Whiskey Cake, they have beverages available and so forth. So we're talking about different timing for that. Another possible location that's a little bit farther, may just attract more folks that are local to that area, is called Athena's Corner. And the advantage of that is it's right across the street from 3 level 2 chargers behind the Hampton Inn Hotel. And I've talked with the manager there and explained how we get together and talk cars and stuff. And he's amenable to that. And those 3 level 2s are divided up. 2 of them are J1772s and 1 is Tesla specific. But thanks to Jason, we even did a little bit of repair on one of them, because one of them had a part that needed some adjustment and tightening. And another interesting thing is that I had coiled up the cords, and then when we went back a second time, I noticed that 2 of them had the cords kind of more spread out. So that obviously showed that other folks are using them. So that's always good. Say again? And messy, yeah. I mean, the third one might have been used too. That person might have just put the cord back on the spot where it's meant to go. But so we haven't firmed up anything to start up yet, but we've been talking about it. So I want to encourage everybody that we'll, of course, send out emails when we start getting something going. And as I said, some mornings, possibly Sunday mornings, the Athena's Corner opens at 9, and over at the mall, if we were to gather before the mall opens, it's easier to meet up and see each other in the cars. And somebody, of course, could use one of the Volta chargers there. Or we might do something in the evening. Athena's Corner is open into the evening. And of course, the Louis Bar and the Whiskey Cake and so forth, and Baybrook are open into the evening. So stay tuned for seeing announcements of some of those things, because I think that would really be fun to get together now that we're far enough post-pandemic. I think that we're good to go, but it's something that I've wanted to get set up a ways back. It's been just a little bit difficult and everything, because it'd be great to see and chat with folks and find out what their interests are and all that kind of things. And of course, always, just like our December get together, encourage people to bring friends and family members and things like that too. So yeah, that was the other thing. I knew there was something else to bring out to folks. So so in terms of the two events on April 22nd, that Saturday, please go online and sign up for those. Yes, Andrew. Both. Those are our two locations. Yeah. So you can pick one of them, because the way they overlap, it's kind of hard for a single individual to do both. But if you got multiple family members and multiple cars, of course, you could go back and forth. But yeah, wherever it works out best for an individual. And so, and when we've done things in the past, we've had lots of public asking lots of questions, and I think it's just going to be even more so now, as some other new vehicles, the F-150 Lightning and other things are out there now. And, you know,
I tried for drive along, ride along with IKEA and he was interested. He was enthusiastic about it, but and we have new insurance from National that covers this, and their loss department said was not interested this time, but they're interested maybe in the future. So, which is I think is encouraging. So it'll just be a display, but if the more events I think we can have, they will pay you, I think, $1,000 to have a ride along, drive along. Electrify America is sponsoring this because they know that getting people in the car makes a difference. Yeah.
all right, very good. So the sign-in sheet's going around for folks in the room, and if there's nothing else, then we'll wrap it up, and we'll see folks, as I said, in April. No regular second Thursday meeting, but we have these, and then the Lucid event that you'll see in the emails, and that hopefully will have some ride opportunities in the Lucid. Yeah, hopefully on the 15th of April. So, all righty. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you out there.